Today's daf we're going to be learning a Sanhedrin daf kuf. I'm going to remind everyone before we start that the siyum is coming up, Ezrat Hashem, on April 9th. We'll have a siyum with shiurim with myself, Ayat Libson, with the community speaker. Looking forward to seeing you all there. Registration should go up, Ezrat Hashem, hopefully today. And you can already register and get your Zoom link for it. And if you're in Israel, there'll be one in Ranana on the night before, Tuesday night, and also in Hebrew. And also there's a special shiur with Michal Tukachinsky next week in Modi'in. So if it's convenient for anyone to come, also it's in Hebrew. The details for the Hebrew siyumim are right on the homepage on the Hebrew side of our website. Okay, with that, we're going to get started. So we started with an apikoris. What is an apikoris? An apikoris, and I promise you we'd find time today to get to what apikoris, where the word comes from. It comes from Epicurus, okay, who was a Greek philosopher, and he created something called Epicureanism. Philosophy is it started in 307 BCE, and it continued through until the late Roman time period. And really, it had something to do with hedonism, about pleasures in life, but it's not from the sense, at least from what I read, not from the sense of pleasures like gluttony, and people somewhat attribute that to Epicureanism, even though it wasn't really. More like being satisfied with life. I was thinking from reading about it, it sounds like the opposite of Jewish guilt. Like you're not supposed to live in guilt all the time and reward and punishment, and that fear, but you're supposed to live in happiness, in always being happy with where you're at and not worrying too much about all sorts of other things. It was materialist in the sense it was all about, the pleasures in this world, but not in the sense again of limited, but enjoy what there is in this world. And a lot and really religious skepticism. And that seems to be the main part that the rabbis are against is religious skepticism. They didn't believe in divine intervention at all. So that is obviously what, I think the rabbis went off on. And again, with the rabbis' term apikoris doesn't necessarily mean exactly what Epicureanism was, but they took, I guess, some concepts from it and said, we're going to call this person apikoros connected with that. So now what we're going to see is however we define it, it's going to have something to do with against the rabbis, really. And what it seems to be really, again, this isn't directly related to Epicurus, but it's about not believing in the rabbinic traditions, really. And we're going to see it's sort of like saying, if you remember, there were all these sects at the time that believed only in the written Torah, and by undermining or undervaluing rabbis, which we're going to see today, right, that basically undermines the system of our oral tradition. It's not just about what's written in the Torah, but it's really about, and so it's not so directly related to the definition of what Epicureanism is, but it obviously came from there. So we started with this debate: is it someone who embarrasses a Talmid Chacham or disgraces them, doesn't treat them with the proper respect, or is it someone who disrespects someone in front of a Talmid Chacham? And then we had the whole thing. Well, what's Megaleh Panim Torah versus what's an apikoros? So we had two interpretations for what the apikoros is. Then we had the second version, which said, it's actually there's two interpretations. What the Megaleh Panim Torah is. Hopefully you listen to Alana's shiur. If not, you can listen to it to get more in depth about Megaleh Panim Torah. But we had those two definitions, perhaps according to the second version, were actually two definitions for what a Megaleh Panim Torah is, to which we ended with this question: well, then what is an apikoros? According to the one who says that the lesser of them is the Megaleh Panim Torah, the one who embarrasses a friend in front of Talmidei Chachamim, then what's an apikoros going to be? Because again, the assumption is apikoros is less severe than that. So that's what we're up to, and we'll just go back for 1 minute to Rav Yosef's answer to that. So Rav Yosef answered and said, it's someone who says, and this is really where you see they're getting at, who cares about Talmidei Chachamim, right? Who are these Talmidei Chachamim? They're just doing it for their own self-interest. I don't need to listen to them. But this goes back to the whole Zakei Mamre and the whole undermining of our system, which is, again, lo b'shamayim, it's not in the heavens, but it's given to us to interpret. And if we don't value and respect the people who are interpreting it, then that's going to basically undermine Judaism. So, right, as opposed to Megaleh Panim Torah, which sounds more like it's against the Torah, like this is more against the rabbinic traditions. So Abaye says to him, what do you mean? If you go against the rabbis and say they're just out here for self-interest, that's actually going directly against the Torah, because you're basically saying that you don't accept them. Just reviewing where we ended yesterday, because we went through kind of quickly. You're not accepting these two psukim. Okay, so Abaye brings one pasuk, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak brings the next pasuk, which is Im lo briti yomam v'layla chukot shamayim va'aretz lo samti. If it not for my brit yomam v'layla, if it not for those learning day and night, basically Talmidei Chachamim, it's interpretation of that pasuk, then it wasn't even worth the world being created. Like the world is created and sustained because of Talmidei Chachamim. So you can't say they're just doing it for their own self-interest. Because of them, we're living. And likewise with the Amarav Nachum Bar Yitzchak, we're at the 3 lines at the end of Tzadi Terem Abet. Now you can learn it from here to the words of Abraham to God when he wants to destroy stone. Okay, this is right. This is actually, is it Abraham saying it or is it God's response? But anyway, it's about right. Vayomer Hashem. Sorry, it's God. Right, then I will save them. B'zchut these tzaddikim. Obviously, tzaddikim in their interpretation, they're Talmidei Chachamim, right? Torah scholars. So they're what's sustaining the world. Okay, so we need a different interpretation then, because that's Megaleh Panim b'Torah. So Ela kigon yativ kamei rabbe v'nafla leishmata b'duchta achrite. You're learning before your rabbi. You remember something from another sugya. Now there's different interpretations. Was it something your rabbi taught you, or is it just something you knew? V'amar hachi amrinan hatam. And then you say in class, it says this somewhere else. Okay, that's an apikoris. Why is that so bad? Right? V'lo amar hachi amar mar. You're supposed to say, this is what you taught us, showing respect for your teacher. Now, some people say this is if your teacher taught it to you. Some people say it's even if they didn't teach it to you, you're supposed to attribute every Torah you know to your rabbi. And if you don't, it's disrespectful. So either which way we understand it, like there's many different interpretations here, but it's not showing the proper respect to your teacher. Okay, Rava Amar. So Rava's going to bring an example now. Kigon, we're now basically going to have examples. It doesn't seem to be that there's so much difference of opinion here. We're just having different variations of what it can mean to not show respect for your teachers and for the rabbis in general. It doesn't mean only your teacher, but Torah scholars. Kigon Hani de Binyamin Asa, the people in the house of Binyamin the doctor. De Amre Maya Hani le Rabbanan. They say, what are the rabbis doing for us? Me'olam lo sharulan orva v'lo asrulan yonah. They never permitted a raven to us or forbade a dove. Okay, and now we're going to basically say that the rabbis, what does this mean? Rashi says it well. Lo amru lanu shum chidush shelo matzinu b'Torah. What are the rabbis doing? They haven't added a single thing beyond what the Torah says. And that's someone who's disrespecting rabbis because they're not understanding the benefit of what the rabbis are providing. They're just saying, Torah says this is forbidden and you've never said it's permitted, so you haven't changed anything, you haven't done anything, you're useless. Where this says it's permitted and you say it's permitted, okay, you haven't gone beyond that. So that's basically defying rabbinic authority completely. Rava and Rava himself, if a treifa came, meaning an animal that was slaughtered and they weren't sure it's a kosher or not kosher, was the animal sick before or not? So if they brought it from the house of Binyamin the doctor, if he found some heter, some way that he could say, like you brought me this treifa, you think it's not kosher, I'm going to show you it is. He would say the following to them: Amarle, techzu de kasharina lecho orva. Go look, I'm permitting you a raven. Now, obviously, he wasn't permitting a raven. A raven's a non-kosher bird. What he's saying is, I'm permitting you something that from Torah law it would seem it was forbidden, but I'm showing you a way that I can permit it. And he's basically trying to show, look, it's not true what you say that I don't do anything. And if he got an animal that they thought was okay, and he found a reason to say, no, this isn't. Look, I'm forbidding a yonah to you. Here you have it, right? That you would think this is okay, but really it's not. And showing this is what the rabbis are doing. Rav Papa Amar, Kigonda Amar Hani Rabbanan. Papa said, people who say those rabbis, okay, if you speak about them in a disrespectful manner, like saying those rabbis, that's disrespectful. But Rav Papa himself, Rav Papa Ishtale Amar Kigon Hani Rabbanan, he forgot that he said that. And one time it happened and he said those rabbis, which was something he said is super disrespectful. Ve'ete b'tanit, and he sat in a fast after that because he felt terrible about what he had done. Now, this reminds me of something my mother always taught me growing up, or would always say to me, which is, it's all in your tone of voice. And that, you could say one thing and it doesn't sound disrespectful, the wording of it, but if you say it in a disrespectful manner, it does. And I think what's happening here, and we'll see also further on, that on the one hand, and this happens in many, many sugyot, they want to give rules. Someone who says those rabbis, is an apikoris. And by the way, and loses their share in the world to come. Now, obviously, you wouldn't put Rav Papa in a category of apikoris. He did say this, but he didn't really mean it that way. Still, he said, I better sit in a fast, and particularly because he was the one who had taught that halacha, and then he himself said it by accident, slip of the tongue. But he obviously didn't mean it disrespectfully, and this tries to show a little bit that it's somewhat subjective. It depends on your tone of voice. It depends what you're intending. There's more to it than, just simply saying a quote, those words. Okay, next. Levi bar Shmuel, the Rav Huna bar Chia, have a kamatakne mitpachot sifrei debei Rav Yehuda. Okay, now again, if you're talking about disrespecting rabbis with your words, again, you have to be careful how you choose your words. So they were fixing up these cloths that they would put on the Sifrei Torah, these covers. They were ripped, torn. They were fixing them, and in the house, in the books of Rav Yehuda, Kimatu Megillat Esther, when Megillat Esther came before them, Amre, and now here it's a bit of a girsa problem. What's exactly said? Either they said Ha lo ba'im mitpachat, this doesn't need a mitpachat, without saying Megillat Esther doesn't need a mitpachat, or they said Megillat Esther doesn't need a mitpachat. We can just go with that one because even that is problematic. And then what's the problem? Amar lehu, Rav Yehuda said to them, Ki gavna nami mechzik ki apikorta. That also looks like apikorta. Why? Because they didn't say, okay, again, different interpretations here. Seems like they didn't ask, right? They're sitting in front of Rav Yehuda, and he's there. Instead of them saying, this is the halacha, Megillat Esther doesn't need a cover, they should have said, does Megillat Esther need a cover? Or Rav Yehuda says that Megillat Esther doesn't need a cover. Okay, instead of just ignoring the fact that Rav Yehuda was in the room. So that also, now he didn't say you're apikorsim. He just said this looks like apikorta. By the way, another root of the word apikorta, the etymology, is from hefker, to hefker, like to something ownerless, but when it's to the rab, right, it's like saying, oh, this is not important. Now, hefker could come, I didn't really look it up, but it might come from apikoris, the root, right? So anyway, that's also something to think about. Rav Nachman Omer, Zeh korei rabo b'shmo. You call your rabbi by his first name, okay, without saying with a proper respect. Rabbi. Why was Gehazi punished? We're going to get to him later. Okay, there's a debate here. He got leprosy. Was it because, are we talking about the leprosy, or are we talking about the punishment that he wasn't allowed to get a share in the world to come? Okay, but either which way, why was he punished? It would make more sense to say he lost his portion in the Olam Haba. He called his rabbi by name. He called his rabbi right by his first name. It's not really his rabbi, but it's Elisha, the prophet. And he talked about Elisha on a first name basis. Yativ Rabbi Yirmiyah, right? What should he have called him? I guess the Ish Elohim, right? It wasn't like he was called a rabbi, but the Ish Elohim, the man of God. Yativ Rabbi Yirmiyah kamed Rabbi Zera v'Yativ Ka'amar. Okay, so Rabbi Zera, now we're going to have a story. And again, we're going to have somebody who says something, and then we're going to say, oh, that was inappropriate what he said. And then we're going to see, was it really inappropriate? Again, we're going to get to this. Things are a little subjective, okay? How you understand something. One person could read that this is disrespectful, and the other person could say, oh, I actually think that's respectful. And it makes sense. So again, the sugya is saying, not so clear-cut exactly where we draw the line here. But again, if we talk about big picture, the big picture is someone who's being disrespectful of rabbis in some sort of way, because again, that's undermining the oral Torah, which is passed down by the rabbis, mostly. Yativ Rabbi Yirmiyah. So Rabbi Yirmiyah was sitting before Rabbi Zera, and he starts to say the following thing. Okay, let's try to remember the characters because we're going to have some back and forth. So Rabbi Yirmiyah starts to quote a pasuk from Yechezkel about a future time. Atira Kadosh Baruch Hu Lotzi Nachal Mibeit Kodshei HaKodashim. Okay, in the future, there's going to be a stream that's going to come out of the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies. Halav Kol Minei Migadim. There's going to be all sorts of beautiful treats there. Shneimar V'Lanachal Yalel Sfato Mizeh Mizeh. Here we quote the pasuk. On the Nachal, we'll have on both sides, Kol Eitz Ma'achal, all sorts of fruit trees. Lo Yibol Alehu, V'Lo Yitom Piryo. The leaves will always be blooming. The fruits will always be on there. Lechodashav Yivaker. Every month it will have new fruits. Again, this is against nature. Really, this doesn't happen with any tree. Because the water is coming out of the temple. And the fruits will be for eating, and the leaves will be for healing. that is going to take us on a tangent later. The leaves will be for healing, and we're going to be on a total tangent after when we get there. Just to give you the structure of today's daf, we're going to finish up the apikoris stuff, and then we're going to go back to this pasuk and then darshan this pasuk, and that will take us till the next sugya. Amar le'ahu Saba. So as Rabbi Yirmiyah is saying this, after when he's finished, comes an older man. Yasher v'chein amar Rabbi Yochanan. Wow, very nice, yishkoch. Okay, and Rabbi Yochanan said like you. Okay, what do you think? Respectful, not respectful? Amar le Rabbi Yirmiyah, the Rabbi Zera. Ki agav nemechse apkorta. This guy's like an apikoris. What he says to the rabbi, yashkoch, said nicely, and Rabbi Yochanan said like you. What do you mean? He should have said, I don't know, like Rabbi Yirmiyah, Yafam Alta, but like Yasher, great job. That's not really so respectful to say to a rabbi. Amar le. So Rabbi Zera says to him, what do you mean? Hi, siyua kamasayla. That's just saying it's really nice what you said. That's actually a compliment. It is respectful. I don't know what your issue is. Ela ishmielach. If you want a story that's similar but different, where really someone disrespected their rabbi, I'm going to tell you a story. And this we actually saw we saw this in Bava Batra. Okay, so you might remember it. He had the yativ Rabbi Yochanan. Vikadarish, Rabbi Yochanan was teaching, and he said, again, we're talking about similar, there's a few similarities here. This is also, Rabbi Yochanan was teaching about a time in the future. Okay, he's going to bring in the future huge stones and gems that are 30 by 30 cubits. And he's going to carve out of those huge stones a gate, okay, 10 by 20, 20 high, 10 wide, for the gates of Jerusalem for the future. Shneimar, how do we know this? V'samti kod shimshotayich u'sha'arayich lavnei ekdah. Important part is the end of the pasuk. Okay, I'll translate. Your pinnacles of rubies and your gates of carbuncles. Okay, these are a type of rock, a stone that your gates will be made of. So that's what it means. Liglega lavototamid. Now, this is obviously disrespectful. Liglug is a word of mocking. The student mocked Rabbi Yochanan when he said this. Amar, we can't even find an egg. We can't even find a stone the size of the egg from one of the smallest birds there are. Okay, meaning even in a teeny size, we can't find stones that size. Lo mishkachina, we can't find. Kule ha-mishkachina, what, they're going to find stones that are 30 by 30 cubits? No way, that's super unrealistic. That's not going to happen. In the meantime, liyamim, okay, at some point later, he went into the water, meaning, right, this is often when you go far away places, you see things you don't normally see. And particularly here, we're going to see things most people don't see. He somehow sees angels. Okay, they're quarrying these huge stones and gems. Amar lehu hane laman. He says, what are these for? The angels answered him, God is going to, in the future, bring these to the gates of Jerusalem. Okay, so he gets back. He sees, sorry, I didn't read that well. Kihadar, when he got back, he finds Rabbi Yochanan teaching in the Beit Midrash. Amarle, Rebbe, Dorosh, says, now this is going to be very similar to the other statement, and this is why Rabbi Zera brings this story, because he says, teach, ulachana eli drosh, and you're a good drasha person, okay? You have great drashot. Kashem sha'amarta kach ra'iti. Just like you said, I saw. So you're a great darshan because look at what you said. But the problem here is not the way he said it, and as we say, the tone. Okay, that's not what's going on here. Amar lo reka. Rabbi Yochanan says you're an empty person. Im lo ra'ita lo ha'emanta. If you hadn't seen it, you wouldn't have believed. He says you can't just respect me because you saw exactly what I said. You're supposed to take my word for it, even if you don't see this vision or whatever you saw. You're someone who mocks the words of the rabbis because you only accept them if you actually see them come true. And that's disrespectful to the rabbis. And that is Rabbi Zera saying that's someone who I would put in the category of an apikoris, not the person who said, great job, Rabbi, Yashikah. Okay, now, what's the end of that story? You might remember from the last time, like the way good Talmudic stories end. Yav be'ene, Rabbi Yochanan looks at this man. Vasa'o gal shalatzamod, and he turned into a pile of bones. Okay, he killed him, right? That's the rabbinic eyes. When they look at people, when they're upset and angry at what they did, right? They can kill somebody with their eyes, and that's what happens to this person. So again, what do we see here? This is what Rabbi Zera says, not apikoris, not what Rabbi Yirmiyahu was offended by what that by what that person said, right? The Hausaba, the elderly guy. Rabbi Zera said, that's not disrespectful. Actually, it was respecting you. It was complimenting you. Okay, so again, like I said, this whole story is really showing the subjectivity of it. And this is really subjective because it's not just depends what's said, but it's, different people understood the same statement and the same that happened in one tone of voice, one way of saying it in two totally different ways. Now we're going to have two tangents because we're done really with the apikoris, but first tangent is a difficulty on the first source. The second source. The second source said that the gates of Jerusalem are going to be 30 by 30, right? Acquired out of these stones. They're 30 by carved out of these stones. They're 30 by 30. And it's going to be 10 by 20, right? 20 high, 10 cubits wide. Meitivim. So now it says, I'm going to take you out. I'm going to bring you in, standing. Okay, commute, standing. What they're going to darshan here is standing very tall, meaning the people in the future are going to be very, very, very tall. Okay, like unnaturally tall. Again, talking about things that will be against nature. Rabbi Meir Omer Matayim Amad. They're going to be 200 cubits. Kashtei kamot shel Adam Rishon. Okay, like the two times the height of Adam Rishon. There's midrashim that say, we've seen this also before, that Adam Rishon was really, really tall. Now, Rabbi Yehuda says, Me'ama. He says, no, only 100 cubits. Now, what's the problem? Okay, we're going to get to in a minute where he gets this from. But the problem is, how are they going to walk through gates that are 20 cubits tall if they're 100 or 200 cubits tall? It's not going to work. People won't be able to get into the city of Jerusalem, right? How much can you bend down? So now, how do we get this? Asher banenu kinitiim gudalim b'neurehem benotenu kesaviyot b'chutavot tavnid echal. This is where they get it's keneged the echal and its walls because our sons will be like growths that are, really tall, and our daughters will be like etched out, that are like etched out like they're kind of designed the way the hechal is, and the hechal was 100 cubits, 100 cubits long. Thank you. Cornerstones is the word, because like cornerstones that are like designed, they're going to be as tall as the Heichal, the sanctuary was long, and it was 100 cubits long, and that's how they're going to be 100 cubits tall. That's his proof. Okay, so now they're going to say, now what's our problem? So there's no way that the gates were only going to be 20 cubits high. How can you explain that? Rabbi Yochanan was talking about the windows. The windows were going to be made from these stones that are 20 by 10. But the door is going to be much larger because, right, the door is always going to be larger than the windows. And therefore, they were talking about two different things. Okay, and that's how the people could be that tall because the doors will be much taller than the windows. Okay, that's one resolution anyway. My va'aleu l'trufa. Second tangent we're going to get off on is what in the first. So this was a tangent off the second story. That was the story that Rabbi Zera said, no, you got it wrong, Rabbi Yirmiyah, it's like this. But in Rabbi Yirmiyah's pasuk, it was talking about that this magical river is going to come out of the Kodesh Kodeshim. There's going to be all these fruits and all these leaves. And the leaves are going to be, and the never wither, the leaves are going to be used for trufa. Trufa in Hebrew is a cure, right? Medicine. So what is this trufa? Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdumi Rav Chisda. Okay, they have a machloket. Which one? Like, what's going to happen? What are people going to be cured from? These leaves. Chad amar la'atir peshel mala. It's going to open the mouths of people who can't speak. People who are mute will now be able to speak. The Chad amar la'atir mala means up in the body. Okay, the mouth. We're going to see what's obviously the mouth, right? But no, we're going to have a peshel mata. Okay, Chad amar la'atir peshel mata, which basically means open it's going to have women who can't have children have children. Okay, it's going to open the mouths, the openings at the bottom of the body. It marnami, and the same machlokah between Yitzchak bar Avdumi and Rav Chisda is also found in the name of Chizkiah and Bar Kapara. Chizkiah amar latir pe'el mim. They say it explicitly instead of peshel mala. They say the mouth of mutes. And Bar Kapara amar latir pe'al karot. Okay, to open the openings for the women who can't have children. Rabbi Yochanan amar l'trufa mamash. Third interpretation. No, like a real cure, okay, for something. We're going to see what this means. So that's really unclear what he means. My litrufa, what does this mean? Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani amar litor panim shel ba'alei hapeh. Okay, he understands this totally differently. It's to change the face of the people who are the ba'alei peh. What are the ba'alei peh? We saw this yesterday. The peh is the ones who speak Torah. So it's going to cure those, I think it was yesterday, who speak Torah, right? Did we have this yesterday, or am I confusing it with something? I don't know. Anyway, the pez is those who speak words of Torah, and we're basically going to say that the okay. Now we have to understand. Talmidei Chachamim, where you see this inside soon, right? In a minute, they work very hard, and because of that, they often don't look good. Okay, they could look sickly, or we're going to talk. Their faces are blackened, whatever that really means, but because they work so hard and they toil in the Beit Midrash, maybe also blackened, like they don't see sunlight, so they don't. I mean, sun obviously makes your skin darker, but it's sort of like they're sitting inside all day. They don't eat so much. They sometimes are poor. They don't always look so good. So we're going to say that that's what it means they're going to be cured. L'tor panim shel ba'alei hapeh. Those who learn are going to have beautiful faces in the olam haba, or in the world, right, in the future time. Darash Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Simon, kol mashchir panav al divrei Torah ba'olam hazeh. If you blacken your face by divrei Torah, meaning again you struggle very hard in this world, HaKadosh Baruch Hu mavhik zivav la'olam haba. Okay, you're going to be shining in the olam haba. Shneamar mar'eu kelevanon bachur karazim. Okay, his look is going to be like the cedars of Lebanon, right? He's going to be beautiful, prized, bachur, like the best of the arazim. The cedar trees. Amar Rabbi Tanchum bar Chanilai. Kol amar ivatzmol divrei Torah ba'olam hazeh. Hakadosh Baruch Hu masbi'o la'olam haba. Okay, if you starve yourself because of divrei Torah in this world, you will get all the good. God will make you satiated in the world to come. Shneimar yurvayu mideshem beitecha v'nachal adenecha tashken. Okay, they'll be satiated with the deshen of with the growth of with the plenty of your house, and they will have, right, the nachal, the river of God's overflowing goodness will water them. Ki ata Rav Dimi amar. Atid, okay, again, we're talking now. What happened? We got to what's this alei l'shufa. We saw three interpretations. Either it's curing the mutes, curing the women who can't have children, the women and men who can't have children, and beautifying the Talmidei Chachamim, which could mean in physical beauty, could mean in just having everything they need in Olam Haba. And now we're off on a tangent about that last one, about what's all the good that's going to be bestowed upon people in the world to come, and then we're going to have some questions about it, some difficulties. Ki'ata Rav Dimi amar. When Rav Dimi came from Israel, he said, Atida Kadosh Baruch Hu litin l'chol tzadik v'tzadik melo amso. God is going to give all the righteous people in the future a handful of gods. Okay? Now, Shneimar Baruch Hashem Yom Yom Ya'amos Lanu Ha'el Shoatenu Sela. Now, what does this mean? God will give blessing. Ya'amos. Ya'amos milashon omso. Omso is handful. So there you see, God's going to give it out in handfuls. Amalei Abaye b'chiyav shalom. How can you possibly say that? Halok farne'emar mi madab b'shalom v'shamayim b'zeret tikein. Right? Who's the one who measured out the water with his? Someone help me out with what the translation of shalo is. And shamayim b'zeret tikein. With his pinky, he created the world. I'm sorry, the heavens. Okay, so basically we have this idea that God created the world with his hand, okay, with his pinky, right? The whole shamayim, the whole heavens are from God's pinky. So his hand must be, right, like the waters, I think Shalo, giving it to me. Anyway, Sha'alo, let me just check again what it means. I think that's with his palm, maybe. Yeah. Who measured the waters in the hollow of his hand? Okay. So basically you have the hand of God did all the waters. Okay. So try to imagine how much good is that going to be? The hand of God is not like our hand. It's not even comparable in any way, shape, or form. How are the tzaddikim going to get that much reward? It doesn't make any sense. So that's what he asked Rav Dimi, where Rav Dimi said this. Amar le, Rav Dimi answers, my time lo shchiche ba'agadata. Why don't you teach Agadata more? Like you're a real good Agada man. Okay, you should be learning Agadot more da'ayu, or teaching them da'amri b'marav v'mishmei de bar Meri. Atira kadosh baruch hu litin l'chol tzadik v'tzadik shlosh me'of asara ulamot. You're right in the way you understood this, because it was said that God is going to give 310 worlds to every tzaddik. Okay, I will give to the ones I love there will be yesh, okay, yesh and gematria, we're going to say, and their otzrotehem, I will fill their treasure, their places where they store things, storehouses I will fill. Yesh begematria tzlat me'av asara. And gematria, yesh, what are they going to get? They're going to have yesh. Yesh is 310, they're going to get 310 olamot. So you're right. Tanya, Rabbi Meir Omer, another statement like this. Whatever you do, you will get rewarded like that in the world to come. So measure to measure. Sa'asa, they understand, is se'ah b'se'ah, like a measurement of a se'ah of yours to a measurement of a se'ah of God's. Now, a measurement of se'ah of God's is way bigger than a se'ah of ours. Again, everything in God's world is much more grand. So, Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, v'chi efshar lomar ken, can you say this? Adam noten malom sola ani ba'olam hazeh, Kadosh Baruch Hu noten lo malom sola olam haba. You give a handful of stuff to a poor person. God's going to give you a handful of God, which is, as we just said, like worlds bigger. V'haktiv shamayim b'zer tikain, right? Exactly back to that pasuk again. V'ata yata omer ken. So now he says back to him, well, you can't say that because, in other words, you don't think that's true? God can. Okay, now I'm going to show you how. Here we're going to have a bit of a proof. It's almost like a mathematical kind of proof, although not really mathematical. First, he starts with Ezo hi midat tova. Ezo hi midat meruba, midat tova, midat tova meraba, or midat poranut. Which one is greater? He's greater when he gives good things to the people, or he's greater when he gives bad things, right? Like punishment to people, okay? How does he mete out punishment and reward? In what kind of way? Okay, so now, I just want to check one thing. Meir says this, Amarlo Rabbi Yeshua, I see. Okay, you have to explain that when Rabbi Meir says this, Rabbi Yeshua said to him, I see. Okay, let me just go back in terms of who said what. I just wanted to check one thing. Right. Rabbi Meir said, lo, and then Rabbi Yeshua said, could you really say this? Okay, and then he said, and then when he says atat iomerken, then Rabbi Yeshua, it seems to kind of questions Rabbi Meir, if I understood this correctly, and then answers Rabbi Meir. Okay, answers this question for Rabbi Meir. So he says the following: what's greater, when God gives goodness to the world, God bestows goodness, or God bestows badness? God bestows goodness in a much larger way than he just bestows badness, or bad things. B'midat tova, how do we know? In midat tova it says, "Vayitzav shchakim mimal v'dalte shamayim patach." So he commanded the heavens to bring good, and he opened the doors of the heavens. Okay, when we open the door, right, everything comes down. Vayamter Elohim man le'echol, and that's how God brought the man to the people during the desert. U'midat puranut omer. Okay, do you remember before we talked about the doors and the windows? We're back to that door and window imagery. Arubot hashamayim niftachu. They open the windows of the heavens, and they're going to arubot hashamayim niftachu, and bad's going to come. So, what do you see here? That obviously midat, the good, is much greater than the bad because doors are bigger than windows. Now, let's talk about how amazing, how grand, I shouldn't say amazing, how grand is going to be the punishment that's going to come. And if the punishment is going to be so great, try to think about how amazing the reward is going to be. And therefore, he says it is possible, this besasa, that whatever you do, God will reward you by much more in the world to come. B'midat puranut k'tiv, and what we're really going to say is so great here, is something's going to be incredibly against nature, okay? And this goes back to the theme that we keep seeing in these days about in these dapim, that the world to come is going to be kind of against everything we know to be true about nature. Be they're going to go out and see from the bodies of the people who went against me. Kitolatam lo tamut ve'isham lo tichbeh. Okay, their bodies aren't going to rot, right? Let me just check this for a second. Right. Okay. Their worms shall not die, neither shall their fire be quenched. Okay. They're going to be an abhorrence to all flesh. Okay. So now we're going to say the following. Okay. Now these people are going to basically withstand this fire that's coming upon them. And in this world, right, when fire happens, people get burnt in a second. And these people aren't going to get burnt at all. right? They're not going to actually burn from this. So what do you see, right? Isham lo tichbeh, it'll never go out. They will be deraon l'chabasar. They'll still be in existence even though they were burned. So now they're going to, right? That shows how huge this puranut is going to be. And therefore, right, God gives them the power to get their bad that's going to come to them. The tzaddikim are going to be able to be receptacles of this unbelievable abundance of good. Okay, now that ends. So again, let's just review, and that will be our review for this part of the daf for today. We won't go back at the end of class. Apikoris. What are the definitions of apikoris? We saw a whole bunch of different ones, although many of them kind of were related to the similar idea. Most of it was basically some sort of disrespect for Talmudei Chachamim, again, undermining Torah Sheba'al Peh. Then, when we had this Rabbi Yirmiyah, who thought one thing, right, and he quoted this pasuk, the trufa. We had to explain what is the trufa, and from there we got off on all the, perhaps it's going to be this, like there were two interpretations, then we got to this third one about how it's going to change the face of Talmidei Chachamim, and then we talked about all the rewards that are going to come, and the huge amount of reward that's going to come. And we also had that other side tangent on the second one where Rabbi Zera corrected Rabbi Yirmiyah said, no, this is what's really disrespectful when someone says like this student, the one that got killed by Rabbi Yochanan. And then we had some sort of contradiction there about the height of the gates of Jerusalem in the future. Okay, now we're back to the Mishnah. Rabbi Akiva adds to the Mishnah and says, not only the people you mentioned in the Mishnah, Akiva Omer, apikoris sefarim chitzoniyim. Even people who read books that are outside of the canon, okay, out of the, right, there was the canonization of the Tanach, what books are in, what books are out, and sefarim chitzoniyim. So what are these sefarim chitzoniyim? Tana b'sifrei minim, or perhaps you have b'sifrei tzdukim. Okay, again, we're back to this Stukim, the Saducees, who again believed, had a bit of a different oral tradition and mostly believed in what was written explicitly in the Torah. So if you read their books, that's again, you don't have a portion of the world to come according to Rabbi Akiva. Rav Yosef Amal b'Sefer Ben Sira Nami Asur the Mikra. He says, it's also forbidden to read in Sefer Ben Sira. By the way, it's not clear if he thinks that you get no portion of the world to come. Right? Some people explain, he says, you can't read them because it's bitul Torah. Like if you're going to learn Sefer Ben Sira, you may as well be learning the Torah. Okay? Because there's useless things in there. So Abaye is now going to try to figure out, Amalei Abaye, my time. What's the reason why it's forbidden to read these Sifrei Ben Sira? Okay, he's the student of Rav Yosef and he wants to understand, Rav Yosef, what's the problem with this? Okay, so now we're going to go through a whole thing of Sefer Ben Sira. When we see these quotes from Ben Sira, which we've seen throughout the Gemara, they do quote things from Ben Sira. So obviously people learned it. It sounds a lot like Mishle, like Proverbs. It's all sort of quips about, life and things and what's good and what's not good. So Abaye is going to now figure out, he's going to bring several psukim, and he's going to say, there's all this psukim here, but, the rabbis say this too. So you can't say, don't read this sefarim chitzoniyim because this is what it says in there, and don't read, the Sefer Ben Sira. It's forbidden to read because they say a lot of ideas that we have in our Tanach. So let's read. My time. Amar le Abaye, my time. Ilema, what's your reason? Is it because it says, Mishum dichtibe lotin tosh gildana meudne? Don't take off the skin that's right above the ear on the fish. Because you might say, right, there's nothing, it's so insignificant, I'll just pull it off. Roast it in the fire with the fish. And you can dip 2 loaves of bread in probably like the oil that's going to come from that skin. In other words, even a little thing that you think is useless actually can, is not useless. And basically, this is what we call bal tashchit. Don't destroy things because you can use them and you should use them and not destroy things that are useful. If it's from the Torah, if you understand this as a simple reading that, don't throw out the skin, then we can understand, right? But then, it also says so in our Torah. And imidrasha, if you want to get to say this is just a parable and it's just really a euphemism for something else, which is orach ara kamashmale, he's going to teach us what's appropriate in sexual relations, to lo livel shalo kedarka, that you shouldn't do that because you shouldn't have bia shalo kedarka, which again, there's always different interpretations of what this is. And the rabbis say maybe it's not appropriate to do this because it's either not sanua, that's sometimes because the wife's on top, the husband's on the bottom, perhaps that, or anal intercourse, which is painful for the woman. So either which way, like Judaism also believes in that. So Either which way you understand this line, how you get from what it says there to Bia Shalokadarka, good question. I'm going to leave that aside right now. I don't really get the connection exactly, but some people understood that line to be talking about that. So now we say, so that Abaye says that's in our Torah too. Or again, sometimes it's going to say not exactly in our Torah, but in our tradition, something the rabbis agreed with. Okay, there's going to be like, it's not going to matter whether it's Torah or it's rabbinic, right? But we agree with that too. Next. Ela mishum dichtiv bat la'avia matmonet shav. Okay, if it says in Ben Sira, a daughter to her father is a how do you say it? Like a gift that's like you're better off without it. Okay, it's like a trap almost. Okay, a false treasure. Thank you, false treasure. Why is that? Mi pakdalo yisham balayla. For fear of her, he's never going to sleep at night. Okay, you have a daughter, causes you many sleepless nights. Let's see why. Interesting line. Now, first of all, why does he call it a treasure? Okay, not for the reasons you would think. Okay, false we'll get to, but why a treasure? Because a woman, right, a daughter, he can theoretically sell off to be a slave woman. So he can sort of make money off of her, okay? But it comes with a lot of worry. So what is this? When she's young, we're worried she'll be seduced, okay, that someone will take advantage of her. Benaruta, when she gets a little older, but she's in that in-between stage, shematizne, maybe she'll go and do it willingly, okay, go off for prostitution or go to sleep with someone. Bagra, shemalotinase, when she gets older, you're worried maybe she won't get married, right? And Nisei, Shemalo Yulabanim, when she's married, you'll say maybe she won't have children. He's Kina, this is the weird one. When she gets old, Shemata Sek Shafim. You're worried she might turn to witchcraft and become a witch. Okay, so there's all these problems when you have a daughter. This is, going to create worries in your life forever. Okay, I don't know. Those who have sons, I think they're also worried about their sons. Different issues, different things. Anyway, there's an interesting line in terms of also understanding their kind of philosophy of life in those days and how they treated their women, for better or worse. They were worried about protecting them. This is always, right? People are always overprotective of their daughters, less so of their sons in many places, right? Worried about what will happen to them, not as much worried about what their sons might do. Okay, that's also a big question, which we see in reality often, even though it shouldn't be that way. Anyway, this is an interesting line, but comes Abaye and says, so if you're worried because Ben Sira says that, and maybe that's the issue, which you might say, right, this isn't our belief. Well, Harabananami Amrua, the rabbis also believe this. Now, how do we know? They didn't exactly say it like this, but we've seen this line many times. Even though the world can't survive without men and women, okay, but happy is the man who has sons, right? But woe is to the one who has daughters, and that's presumably for those reasons, because daughters cause worry. Okay, as a mother of 4 daughters and 1 son, I don't know. Kind of like my daughters. Okay, elamishum dichtiv. But however, maybe it's this line. Lo ta'il davya b'libech. Don't have worry in your heart. Like you shouldn't have, you shouldn't be worried about things. Digavre gibarin k'tal davya, because even very strong men have died because of worry. Hashlomo amara, but Shlomo said that. Tagabalev ish yashchena. Okay, the worry in a man's heart, yashchena. Now, what is yashchena? So they're going to switch the shin with the sin, and they're going to darshan it in 2 different ways. Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Asi, chadamar yisichena midato, can make a person crazy. Chadamar yisichena lachirim. You should talk it out. Talking it out will help you. Okay, but either which way, it's a problem. Okay, it's a good psychological insight, right? Talk things through, and you'll feel better about it. What about this one? Don't have a lot of people in your house. Don't let everything into your house. Like, don't make your house like a circus and with tons of people coming in. It could create all sorts of problems. Rabbi Nami Amara, but Rabbi said the same thing to Tanya. Rabbi Yomer, don't bring a lot of people into your house. Okay, if you have too many friends and you bring them all home, it's going to destroy your house. Now we finally find it. Abaye, after suggesting all these options, now says, here it is. Zal dekan kortaman, avdekan sichsichan. Okay, it already sounds like gibberish. Okay, what does this mean? So Rashi explains, someone who has a thin beard will be that's a zal dekan. His zakan is dal. He will be a kortaman, that means it's a sign that you're a smart person if you have a thin beard. Avdekan, if you have a thick beard, sichsachan, you're not a wise person at all, you're a fool. Okay, it's a sign you're a fool. This is silliness, right? If you blow on your cup to get off the foam from the beer when you pour it, it shows you're not thirsty. And Amar b'mayachol lachma, if you say, what should I dip my bread in today? Lachma savmine, we take your bread away because you're obviously not hungry. If you were hungry, you would just eat it right away. These are ridiculous things. Madi le ma'abarta b'dikne, if you have a split in your beard, kule amalo yachlele, nobody will be able to overcome you. Okay, a part. Thank you. That was the word I was thinking of. A part in your beard. No one will be able to you'll be very strong. You're a strong person. Okay. This is ridiculousness, and this is the stuff in Ben Sira that's a waste of time to read. And if you do that instead of learning Torah, it sounds like you might not have a portion in the Olam Haba. Now, even though Rav Yosef explained this about, he was the one who said Ben Sira is a problem, I'm Rav Yosef, but there are good things in there and you can learn them. So what are these? You have a good wife, it's a good gift, and you will always be in a Yirei Elohim, a God-fearing person. Bad wife is like leprosy to her husband. You should chase her out of your house. You should divorce her, and you'll be healed from your leprosy. Isha yafa, beautiful woman, ashrei ba'ala, her husband will be happy. Mispar yamav kiflayim, he'll double his lifespan. But don't look at women who are beautiful. You might be trapped by her, and again, if she's a married woman, you'll get into trouble. Don't hang out with her husband because she's around there. Because caused a lot of people to fail with being in the presence of a beautiful woman. And huge are the numbers that she is killed. Rabim hayu pitzei rochel, the rochel who goes peddler, who goes from house to house and often is in the house of a woman when no one else is home, and then the husband comes home and sees him there and gets jealous and hits him. So the rochel has a lot of wounds on him. Hamargilim lidvar v'rak nitzotz mavir gachelet. Those who, margilim lidvar erva. If you're involved in erva, right, inappropriate relations, it's like a spark that lights coal. Kikluv malei of came to him like a chicken, like a pen. Chicken, what do you call it? Losing my words in my rush, but a chicken coop is full of chickens. Their houses are full of deceit. That's what we saw before. Don't have a lot of people in your house, right? It causes problems. You should have a lot of friends who like you and say hello to you. Reveal your secrets to 1 in 1,000, meaning keep secrets. Even from your wife, you should keep secrets. You shouldn't tell her. This is like, remember the Shimshon story. Don't worry about what's coming tomorrow, because you don't know what today is going to bring. And maybe you won't even be there tomorrow. And you're worried about nothing, right? Something for no reason. Kol yimei oni ra'im, Ben Sira omer, right? All the days of a poor person are bad. Ben Sira says, af leilo, we've learned this before, b'shefel gagim kagol, muram harim karmo. His house is the lowest roof in the city, and his vineyard is the top of the city. Mimtar gagim legago, so all the rain from all the other roofs falls on his house. Ume'afar karmo lekramim, and all the soil from his vineyard drops down to all the others. Okay, we'll go a little bit more. I know it's a long daf. It's late, but I'm going to skip the siman. This is just siman for the next section. Because now, the last one, I didn't say this, but this is a drasha on a pasuk from Mishlei. Pasuk of Mishlei is kol yimei oni ra'im. And what Ben Sira says, even their nights, because, I didn't really say this, but they're just worried about their house being destroyed. They're worried about their vineyards being destroyed, just like we saw with the man with the daughter, right? They just don't sleep at nights anymore. So now we're going to talk about this pasuk. Kol yimei oni ra'im, and the continuation of that pasuk is tov lev mishtet tamid. Okay, so the days of a poor are bad, but tov lev, someone who's a tov lev, will always be happy. Okay, we're going to see if it's a good thing or not. We're going to have a number of interpretations of this. We'll start today. Amar Rabbi Zera Amar Rav, Mai Tichtiv Kol Yimei Oni Ra'im, Elu Ba'alei Talmud. The people who learn Talmud have rough lives because it's very hard to understand the Talmud. Tov lev, they have to struggle with it. Tov lev mishtet tamid, but it's party if you learn Mishnah. Elu Ba'alei Mishnah, because Mishnah is easy to understand. Rav Amar Ipcha, he said the opposite. Talmud, you really understand things properly. Mishnah, it's like getting a taste, but you don't really understand anything. So you're sad because you don't understand anything. Gemara, that's where it's all at, right? That's where you really understand. Behind it, Amar Misharsha, and that fits with what Misharsha said, Mishmei Rava. My dachtiv masia avanim yatsev bahem. Elu ba'alei mishnah, bukei itzim yisachem b'hem, elu ba'alei Talmud. Again, pasuk, someone who's quarrying stones will be sad by that. That's Mishnah. But someone who cuts trees will really benefit from it, will warm from them, right? You don't get much out of quarrying stones, but you get a lot out of having wood. You see like you get the benefits directly. Rabbi Chanina omer, kol yimei oni ra'im, mi sheyesh lo isha ra'ah. Tov lev mishet tamiz, yesh lo isha tova. Okay, if you have a good wife versus a bad wife, right? You'll struggle if you have a bad wife, but you'll be happy if you have a good wife. Rabbi Yani omer, kol yimei oni ra'im ze istinis. Someone who's very particular about everything, will always be unhappy. Tov lev mishet tamiz, ze shedato yafeh. Someone who's chill about things, take everything in stride, then they'll be happier. Okay, we're going to stop right here, and we'll continue this next up. And this was all, again, we got here because of the sefarim chitzoniyim. What are they? Either sefer Saducees or sefer Ben Sira. And then what was so bad about sefer Ben Sira? Actually, there's a lot of good things in it, but there were things that were totally useless. We only found one right now. But because of that, it's a waste of time to learn. And if you learn, you might not get a portion in the world to come, at least according to Rabbi Akiva and according to Rav Yosef's interpretation of that. With that, we finish for today. Wishing everyone a good day.